It's on. Yeah. Take two. So this is a presentation about attribution. Drink. Cyber attribution. Yes. However, it is simple attribution. We're going to cover a lot of the broader topic to make sure that people understand there's more than just cookie tracking and handle tracking. But the majority of what we're here to talk about is how to track people down. This was prompted by, so you have a frame of understanding why I'm talking about it, by a client who was being harassed online. And when people come to me and ask me how they can make money and how they can get into the business and do things with this skill set that we seem to acquire, this is one of the ways you can do that. So, use your powers for good. Do not use this information and knowledge to harass people. Not that there's a whole lot in here that's very in-depth, because this is more of an introduction to the topic. But the information in here is also not complete. So this is about 8 hours worth of material shoved into a 1 hour presentation. There's plenty of more work to do. You know how to find me online. All the information you need is online. Everything's available online. And this topic has been covered in numerous other places before, although not exactly like this. So it's fun to figure out who posted stuff, and it's good practice. It's something that you can do for free to hone your skills. You can track people down. But don't do it maliciously or with bad intent, because that's called stalking. And if you thought we were going to teach you how to find your ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever that may be on Facebook, this is not that presentation. Most importantly, this is me doxing me, so you don't have to bother. Everything that is in this presentation comes from me and old profiles and old me things, because I can't use real people. They might get upset. I could probably use Adrian, but what would be the point? We all know all of this stuff out there. So you needed something new that you hadn't seen. So this is me. I am the example. So the problem that we're facing is anonymous posts. When people say something that you don't like, when people say something, especially about your client, that is bad for them, like your business sucks and you sell poisonous food, you should never eat here, that affects their business. There's actual damages that can be assigned. So if you can track that person down, you can sue them and get some of that money back. But in a lot of cases, it's just not worth it. It's not enough damage to bother with, but in some cases it is. In this case, it was an extended amount of damage over a long period of time, which included intentional destruction of an animal not in distress. In other words, they killed her dog. So we were very interested in finding this person. But anonymous posts and so on, you don't know who that handle is. Tracking this stuff down is not presto, I know who this is. You have to go through the motions, and if you're going to use it in court, it has to be provable in court. The average person doesn't have the ability to do some of the things that we do from the legal perspective, because we have the legal system behind us. If you can't issue subpoenas or you can't ask for subpoenas, you're going to limit yourself to a whole bunch of narrower perspectives that may not produce what you want. On the other hand, if you are working outside of the law, for example in government, you have access to a whole bunch of other techniques and options that we'll touch on a little bit that are much more productive and faster. But there really isn't much the normal person can do. Because unless they're dumb enough to, hey, this is my Facebook profile and this is actually me, and make it really easy for you to identify who they are, like if they slam you on a Google review, but they use their actual Google account to do it, that's not going to take you long to track them down. But real perps, real people with intent, real stalkers, real bad guys, cover their tracks pretty well. Typical tools that they use, VPNs, impersonating, using other people's names. Impersonation is one of my favorites, because it creates noise. It creates a lot of noise depending on how you do it. For example, if I go by the handle John Stewart, and I am posting in political forums, there's going to be a lot of mixed confusion there because it's the same stuff in the same forums. But the biggest problem that we face in attribution with this stuff is the second main point here, that is they fail to get in touch with professionals in a timely manner. Because aside from medical data, legal data, things in regulated industries, nobody has to retain their logs. There's no reason that Facebook has to retain any logs other than the fact that the CIA and the NSA want them to, but they have that isolated in a different place in Utah. But nobody else has to maintain logs. So if you have a sketchy website and you want their audit trails to figure out who user 217 is, you have to get to them in a timely fashion if you want any chance at all of getting those audit trails, because they will either delete them intentionally, they will roll them. There's all sorts of reasons why they just aren't there. They weren't configured right to begin with, because there's no reason for those people to do anything like that, so they don't. However, if you can reach out and touch them with a subpoena or an audit or a legal order, you can then force them to start logging. And if you don't trip up your target, you can then get those logs back. But again, it has to be done in a timely manner because you may lose the target, the subject of interest. So time for a lot of these operations is quite literally important. Twitter keeps everything forever. Facebook does, but they don't tell you. You don't have access to it in general. There's the Wayback Time Machine. We're going to talk about that. But time, when you're trying to track people down for things they do on the internet, just like the real world, is very important. Camera images from security cameras, they don't stick around forever. But we have multiple methods of identifying perpetrators depending on how we're going about it and what they did. If it's a physical issue, you can be using physical identifiers. But we're talking about social media stuff. So we're just going to kind of skip over fingerprinting and hair and stuff like that and talk about linguistics, technical details, exotic identifiers, and of course subpoenas. They can all be automated to some level. The nice thing about computers is that they make these processes faster for us. So you can go out and use tools to make this stuff go really fast, especially if you're working for a government. Frame. But when you're doing this stuff professionally and you're not a government and you're not doing it because you're stalking somebody, you have to take the client and sit them down and have a talk and ask them, are you sure you want to do this? This is going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000. It's not cheap to have somebody spend this kind of time on technical matters and run this stuff to the ground, especially when it's dead end after dead end. If you get lucky, you can click a button in Maltego and presto, there's your answer. But you're still going to have to put together an evidence package. It's still going to take time. None of this stuff is free, so they have to be damaged enough to make it worth their while. If it's personal reputation and it's an individual, chances are they may just want the knowledge. They may not need the extra baggage of legal protection, but it's always going to cost something. The other problem that we run into is every now and then it's a one-off. You get somebody who goes home drunk one night after eating at a restaurant and doesn't like the food and logs on to somebody's account and posts a bad review, and they're gone. They sober up, they forget all about it, it never happens again. There's no way to track that down. It's gone. And it was only a one-time deal, so no big deal. Time is always the enemy. But it's not hopeless. There's a variety of ways that we can track people who do leave extended trails, which is the people that we really want to track down, because that's where the effort is. They put in the most effort in being jerks, which makes our job easier to track them down. Linguistics analysis is always fun. Some of us have certain speech patterns, certain ways that we write, certain things that we say. Adrian has certain characteristic phrases that he uses quite frequently. I have characteristic phrases that I use quite frequently, like time is money. Then there's OSINT, which is kind of what we're here to talk about in a roundabout fashion. There's social engineering traps, which is another favorite of mine. If you can't get the logs, if you can't get the evidence from the existing materials, you can construct a trap. This is fairly easy if you know your subject, which brings us back to figuring out who they are through the OSINT pathway. We may not be able to get attribution, but if we can figure out enough about the target, then we can construct an SE trap and get them that way. Always work through a lawyer. Things like that can border on legal problems, can create legal situations that you may not be equipped to handle, including things that would need warrants. So work with your lawyer and potentially law enforcement when doing things like that. Unless you're just trying to trap your friends and then it's cool. Fire up set, have fun. Bait traps is another one. You may have seen or heard of people who have warrants out being trapped by winning prizes. That's a great one. You have won an Xbox and an all-expense paid trip to Vegas to see the new computer system displayed, and then they show up to collect and you arrest them. Bait traps is a physical thing, but it's there if you need it. Private investigators are necessary in some states for all of this stuff, so know your laws if you're doing this in a business format. You may not be allowed to do some of this stuff without a license. And then there's more exotic traps. Pretty much, it's open to your imagination how to get people to give you the information that you need to set them up. Which, go back for just a second, things like exotic traps cross readily into this is how criminals make money, social engineering. Your uncle from Nigeria who died with all that money, that's just an SE trap that's criminal in nature. Linguistics tracking. You've got to have enough content to make it useful. This is more useful in a political forum than it is on a restaurant review board. As you can see, there's going to be a lot more text, especially if they're very erudite, vocal. They talk a lot or write a lot. Spelling mistakes are an easy catch. But this is not the normal sort of stuff that we use for OSINT tracking. This is more on the intelligence side, but it's legal. When you're playing with friends or doing this stuff for personal use, you may not be trying to figure out who the jester is, but you can. Technical tracking. Now we're getting into the fun stuff. Data. Everybody knows about the extra invisible image files that show up when you're browsing the net and the different types of cookies and tracking and all of that stuff. The neat thing about those is that they can work in the reverse direction. So what's used to track you can also be used to track back. Particular identifiers will indicate a specific individual. And this is where it starts to get more interesting. Down the list here, you'll see EXIF data, which isn't as big as it was, but chip IDs for Intel. If you can get their chip IDs from their processor, that's a pretty solid match. It's not guaranteed. Will it hold up in criminal court? Probably not. Will it hold up in civil court? Probably. You have to do some tricks to get that to work for you, though. Like get them to run a program. Memes, images, anything that anybody posts on the internet in any form, in any content, especially if it's a consistent use over time, like Facebook, Twitter, Imager, every app that's on your phone, all of that stuff can be used to track people back. We're going to talk about a little bit of it in detail. Then there's the exotic stuff, which falls more into government work, getting audio recordings of people, figuring out who they are from that, watching through cameras to see if somebody is the same person when they're in disguise and not, facial recognition, GPS history, signal noise. Signal noise is one of my favorites, but it requires you to have access to the thing that's generating the signal noise. And when we're talking about this, the historical version, I can't remember whose murder mystery it was, But there was a murder mystery, and the letters were typed, and there was an error in the typewriter. And they tracked it back to the typewriter and the ribbon, and they found the perp, and yay! Well, that works for just about anything that produces any sort of signal. If there's an error in it, it can be detected. And if you can detect that error and track it back to something at their location, then you can pin the tail on the donkey, so to speak. So this is an example of signal noise from a monitor that was taken from a screenshot. If you serve a warrant on that person and collect all of their computer stuff and find the monitor that generates the same problem piece of noise, you've got a match, potentially. That's exotic, though. We're not going to be doing that. So the tools that we're using for OSINT matchup in common use, everybody here knows about Maltego. Who doesn't know about Maltego? No? Okay, Maltego is a really handy tool. I'll show you a little couple pieces of it here. But it lets you put in things like a user handle or a username or a phone number or an email address or a physical address, and then press a button and go check the web for everything else that matches. So it goes from I've got a handle to a map of 1,000 different options in like the blink of an eye. And then you have to go through and filter and go no, 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 yes, no, 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 yes. And then you can recursively go through this data to generate huge maps about people and their habits. And the one that I put together for the case for the lady with the dog was about 4,000 pieces of data from the perp and related people who were involved. And it turned into a conspiracy and terroristic threats and all sorts of fun stuff. And I'm sure the DA had a blast with it after I got rid of it. But the diagram that matched up everything they were doing online with all their Facebook and Twitter and Imager and everything else was huge. And Maltego just makes it really easy to do. You can download a copy, you can play with it, you can learn to use it without paying for it. You can buy a licensed copy. I think it's like $300. It's not expensive. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the demo part. Not a live demo. Never do live demos. Bad idea. Process. So the process for tracking somebody down and pinning this information on them, it all depends on what you're starting with. Typically, in online harassment type stuff, you've got a handle. If you're lucky, you've got an email address. If they never use that handle anywhere else ever again, you're probably going to have difficulty tracking them down, and you're going to have to use some tricks to get them to interact with you, like responding to their post. If they only used it once, they may not be monitoring, though. So it could just die on the vine and go nowhere. But if you have a handle that's been used in multiple places, that gets you to different parts of the web, different things that they do, tells you more about the subject, gives you more leverage. And then each time you flip over a rock and find something new that's associated with the perp, it gives you a new place to look. It's usually a mixture of manual and automated searching, what we do. Everybody who does this for a living has scripts that they run. I mean, Maltego is basically just one giant script engine that you don't have to mess with. But even that can be enhanced. And I still use my own Google scripts and Bing scripts, Google Foo, for tracking stuff that way, because it's faster and easier, and it gets me the data that I need to put into Maltego to make it more useful. So there's a cyclical mix that you go through to get this information to churn until you find your solution. You can't rely on any of it. One of the problems with attribution is that until you're entirely positive, until you have proof beyond any reasonable doubt that it is that person, for example, we picked up their laptop and my gosh, yes, that's them. If you don't have physical evidence matching them to the crime, you can't really pin stuff on somebody just through their virtual presence. You can make it look really bad, but it's going to be a problem. You can use it for whatever purposes you want, and making them stop. But if it's going to be a legal thing, you're probably going to want some sort of physical tie-in. Like their phone. They use their phone, that's a physical tie-in. But it comes down to needles and haystacks. If you pick somebody else's handle, if you pick a non-unique handle, it's a pain in the behind to track you down. If you plug John Smith into Maltego and tell it to go, you're going to be doing a lot of filtering for a long time because that's a common name. But if you plug in something distinctive like ICBKR, you're going to find a very small solution set, and it's going to be easy to track. One of the funny things about people who like to harass people online is they tend to have egos the size of the planet. And eventually, even if they use something anonymous to begin with, you're going to find a unique, distinctive handle. The Prez 8827. That's going to lead you directly to the one person that you're interested in. Common identifier. So if you're a bad guy, obviously do exactly the opposite of what we're saying here. Pick common names. Use Smith and good OPSEC. OPSEC makes our job terribly difficult. Luckily, almost nobody is any good at it, even the professionals. OPSEC is life, and it will make the job impossible within a limited scope. So, the first technical thing that I want to talk about is browser fingerprinting, because it's really easy and we all use browsers. What your browser shows can track you down very readily, and it's not hard to do. Anybody can write this. You can throw up a website and start tracking people yourself. Every time you visit a site, they're tracking. We all know we're being tracked on the web these days. This is not news to us anymore. What may be news is how closely identifiable you are based on your browser signatures. The people who make money off of selling us are very keen on this, and they can identify us very well. This site, miunique.org, is great for showing you just how bad you are. Feel free to go there right now. Go right ahead. You are being tracked. Machine fingerprinting goes right along with that. If you can't get them from the browser, you can get them from the machine. The CPU ID is, like I said, one of my favorites. But in order to fingerprint the machine, generally speaking, you need system access. You can't get system access without a payload, without hacking, which is why we're talking about this at a hacker conference. But you have to have a legal justification for inflicting malware on somebody's machine. But again, it works. Google, after all, has an actual patented process for how to identify you from your surfing characteristics. They are keenly interested in keeping track of everything we do, as is Facebook. People selling things track you. All of them. Amazon, everybody, they've all got it. We've all seen it, experienced it. You're talking on your phone to somebody and you mention a product, and then you go use Facebook on an entirely different computer, and lo and behold, there's an advertisement for that product, and you're like, what is this? Well, that's because you're the product. But we can use these same things that they're using to track us to track perps. So understanding how they work and knowing your target. If we're looking at, just to simplify the example, if we're looking at cookies from America and our perp is not an American and they're not in the continental United States, American cookies from websites serving American people are not going to help us. We need to know who our subject is to figure out how we want to track them. But you can use their tools to track back. You can, for instance, buy, if, say, the interaction with the perp is occurring in a Facebook group, you can purchase advertisements on Facebook for next to nothing. And if you set your keywords up to match what it is they're posting and where they're posting, you can be pretty sure that you're going to pick them up as part of the group. And it's cheap. But handles, nicks, pseudonyms, these are all the things that we normally see. And they're the first thing they like to put into Maltego. They show up in all kinds of places that do not want you to track stuff, so you have to know your way around the web and how to get in there and see things that you're not supposed to see, but it's there. Maltego, the 800-pound gorilla, we talked about this a bit. It requires a lot of patience. When it pops out 1,000 results for something, you just have to take your time and go through it. It's just the way it works. Maltego is available from Perturba.com. I'm not endorsing them as the only solution here, but they are slick as hell. So there you have it. It's also not expensive. This is what it looks like when you use it. This is the not live demo. So you've got you've got our handle, you've got Twitter, you've got email. This is almost no filtering because ICBKR is a very distinctive handle. There is some garbage now because it's 2018 and everything that is unique on the network is now not unique thanks to spam and different things. But it will kick out Yahoo. I can't read that one. RCN, Twitter, some phone numbers, a couple other handles, lots of stuff for you to take off with. So the stuff works. No denying that. Everybody wake up. Secret hidden entrepreneur tip. Time is money. Anything you do that saves money can make you money. That saves time can make you money. Whenever you're doing stuff as a professional or as a hobbyist or whatever, if you figure out a way to save time, whether you write a script or you write a program or an app or anything like that, that's a way to make money. So monetize what it is you do, or make money off of the secret that you're keeping, either one. There's a couple companies who are very, very good at stuff. Anybody heard of Gray Key? Gray Key makes a device for breaking into phones. Apple was very upset about this, and they made their new OS so that Gray Key couldn't get in, and that lasted about 5 minutes. Because Gray Key knows a whole bunch of secrets, and they don't tell Apple. So if you know stuff that is worthy of being paid for, by all means, get paid for it. Never do something for free if you have bills to pay. And all of this stuff is like that. IP addresses is another one. This used to be in the dark early days of the internet. If you had an IP address, you could assign it to somebody. And that was really cool because you could blame people. You're like, this dude over at NASA, he's a pain. I don't like him. He makes bad comments in my political forum. And you knew it was them because you had the IP address. Well, that's all garbage now. But it's still something to work with, right? If you have an IP address, you have a starting point. It may not be the destination, but it's a place to start. And eventually you can track through the net and find where they are posting from, even if it's a Panera Bread. That's a particularly broad endpoint to work with, but it's still a Panera Bread, right? You now know where they are. They're not using a repeater from inside of a Panera Bread, that's for sure. Well, I mean, somebody could be, but no, not these guys. So variable values dynamics. Part of the problem with IP assignments, though, and people who are serious about this, like people who are paid to harass other companies, yes, that's an actual thing. People are paid to harass companies, or people who are engaged in industrial espionage, any of the criminal aspects of IT that we deal with. The rule of hacking, what is the first rule of hacking? Anybody? Nobody? First rule of hacking, always cross a border. Preferably a language border, preferably a political border. So if you're going to hack, you're going to do it from a Russian address. But that's only one layer removed, and probably not a good idea because the Russians are no more friendly than the CIA. So if you're going to do it, you're going to cross multiple borders and multiple language barriers. That's the best way to stay hidden. Even if they can trace it back, chances are they can't get the audit trails, they can't get the access, they can't get the records. It's going to be a dead end. That's what the big boys do. Attribution is hard. The best one I heard a year and a half ago, was there was a hack and somebody came out and blamed China, and then somebody pointed out that the code was Russian, and then somebody pointed out that it was actually the Israelis. And I was like, yeah, way to go, guys. MAC addresses, again, limited availability. We can change MAC addresses now. This used to be carved in stone. Now not so much, but it's still a piece of data. If they're using a MAC address and they don't change it and it's valid and you have the hardware, then you're good to go. MAC addresses show up in log files for systems, routers, things like that. But again, they're limited by time. So if you're doing some sort of attribution that involves this material, time is of the essence, or you're going to have to lay a trap. Images and characteristics. For a while there, EXIF data, does everybody know what EXIF data is? It's the stuff that cameras and phones embed, the knowledge that they embed inside the pictures that you take, that you then upload to the web that we can then look at and track you back, like the GPS location of where you took the picture. Now, Facebook and Twitter and a bunch of other people, Google things, they have started stripping out all of the EXIF data because stalkers were using this to find people, and people were getting upset about it, but it's still out there in some places. And if you're dealing with pictures that were uploaded to a BBS or something low-key, not a Facebook, something more mild, or something on the darknet, then the EXIF data is still there. And that can be a direct link. Things, other characteristics in the images are the background, different pieces of repeated use, different I tend to reuse a certain set of memes. Anybody here uses memes for communication, you know what I'm talking about. There's a certain subset that you keep handy because you're going to reuse them again and again and again. So if those keep popping out in different comment threads with different handles, maybe I've got a characteristic there that I can work with. And then backgrounds and pictures. If I'm taking selfies and I have a Guy Fawkes mask on and the background is identifiable as something, then I can pin location on you. I can tie that picture to you using what's in the background. You see that used a lot in CP cases with kids, which is terrible and sad, but I'm glad they figured out a way to use the data to get the bad guys. So EXIF data, did they take it? Did somebody else take it? Is there any data? But again, this is becoming more limited, so sort of skip on that. Image characteristics themselves is fun. It's mostly a manual operation. There are people who write scripts because they do this all the time. Fun things to look for: pixels that drop out, certain color features in a camera. If you can identify what specific brand of camera they are using, there are certain image characteristics that will be produced by that camera in every picture. And you can then go back to image search using those characteristics and find other pictures that they have taken or likely have taken. You'll be writing custom code for that though. Pixel maps, colors, locations. They can Photoshop you onto a picture of Yosemite, but it's still a picture of Yosemite. I'm sure a lot of us have used Google Image Reverse Search to go back and take something and find something else that, like the original picture. Footprints, domain, Amazon ID, different things that they're using, deleted posts from way back. There's all these different little dark places that you can find. You have to dig into this stuff. Old websites that they may have generated. And if we started with, well, here's, I wanted to pull this up. Let's see. Okay, escape. Maybe not. There we go. Good. All right. 1 second. This is a nice blog by Michael Basil. Give some credit out to somebody who helped me find some stuff. He talks about digging through old Reddit posts here and attribution for the Texas bomber. Can't read it. Austin bomber. Just trying to, another way to find attribution, Reddit. All of these sites are useful to you depending on how prolific your guy you're trying to track down is. Back to our regular scheduled presentation. Anybody needs the links for this, they're all in the slides online, or catch me afterwards. Yay. Man, this technology's gotten so much better. Okay, so we started out with ICBKR, and the chain is lengthening. One of the pieces that came out in our search there with Maltego was DSL Reports. There's an entry on a DSL Reports website. DSL Reports is a provider documentation and testing website. So what we get from this is the location of the last place that he was when he ran the speed test, which gives us a location. Huge, huge advantage in finding people is knowing where they are. We've got time frames for when I joined, when he joined, when I joined, the last time that it was seen, so you know that it's still active, they're still using it. There's all kinds of valuable information just in this one hit. The second piece that popped out was this old web entry from a cobweb, rcn.com/ICBKR. There might be some source code there we can look at. Maybe there's some comments in there that will lead us down into other paths. Maybe there'll be language indicators. But the fact that this alias was now used in multiple places tells us that it's a consistent alias. If we can tie it back to me, we know that this is the same thing over and over again. And we've got a wonderful time frame here, 2005 to now. That's a lot of material that we're going to be able to get, assuming I was prolific. And we've got IP addresses over time, which tells you if I moved around, if I came to where Allentown, PA recently, maybe I was testing someplace else before then, that information would then allow you to tie back to a personal history report, which you can get without any of this additional electronic stuff, right? You all know that you can just log on to a site, pay them $10, and run basically a history of somebody and get their addresses and their phone numbers, any criminal filings, all kinds of nasty stuff. So that combined with this will give you a pretty solid reference. Crumbs that come out when you're looking at the DSL report site, other things that are useful potentially, but maybe a little minor. Different types of OS and browser, possibly some SE targets that come out of the Maltego search. We have locations to put crafted malware. We now know that it's United States, it's Eastern US. We can do things like send an email to me that says, the Eagles are not going to win the Super Bowl this year, they suck. And if I'm an Eagles fan, I might open that email up and click on the link and reply or something like that. Not an Eagles fan, by the way. Not a football guy. So location, and then joined at 3 a.m. That's weird. Is that on the previous one? Why did I say that? Oh yeah, so joined at 3 a.m. Who works at 3 a.m.? I don't know. But it tells you that there's a clock, there's a person doing stuff at odd hours. So the other piece that popped out of Maltego that I couldn't read is Jinx. There's an entry down here on the bottom. When we pop in Jinx, which is a t-shirt site let's go with that, it's a t-shirt site, they make cool t-shirts. But something popped out based on that information from Maltego that takes us to memegenerator.net. So now we've got a link to another site. We've got more information tied to ICBKR. Tells us more about the perp. Gives us something to work with. Chances are, so I probably play games. I have an Amazon account because I bought a fire controller, so now you've got more places to look for more information. And I like memes. I like them well enough to actually make one, so you've got more content there. If you go and dig around, you can probably find more things that I've done. Maybe a bunch more, maybe not. I don't know, but there's some. It's something to work with. So you've got different characters that I've created, actual OC, as we say in the meme world. Posts like, you can look at comments on my posts and see if there are responses to those comments, because if I thought enough to reply to a comment, it's probably going to contain some information that may be useful. And if nothing else, you can reply to those comments and get my attention, especially if it's a recent contribution. That shows that I'm still active, that I'm still paying attention to that account. One of the other memes that pops out leads you into a whole nother area. Does anybody know who Cryptia is? Yeah. Cryptia is a spook, like a real spook, like an intelligence guy. Really smart cat. He uses this stuff for tracking government actors. And he is way better at it than I am. But I've got a response on one of his posts. So now you know that I know a little bit about the intelligence world and some of the people who are within it, at least enough to have conversations and not look like an idiot talking to this guy, which means I have some level of skill. That's another piece of knowledge for you to exploit. Also, you know that I am at least familiar with him, possibly friendly. You may be able to impersonate him and get me to respond to something that way. It's more material for you to use. And if you're trying things, if you're trying to interact with the perp and failing, you have to just keep trying, right? One of these is going to work. But you also don't want to tip them off. If I get 100 friend requests from 100 different people on 100 different websites in the same day, chances are I'm going to know something's up. And again, this gets us down to Twitter down here. Another confirmation that this is the same cat from Twitter. If we go to in-URL icebreaker, using our Google foo, we pop out a website, a blog, that contains copious amounts of information that detail personal habits, political leanings, opinions, professional habits. This is like a jackpot. If we can prove that this is the ICBKR that we have been looking for, this gives us scads of information to use. The only problem is that it's from 2006. But people don't change that much over time, so while this might be a cobweb, it's still going to be packed full of things that we can use. And there's a chance, since it's still out there and hasn't been
doing a bust up stuff.
Huh?
There's also one that was added for bust up or Buster Rhymes. Or
Oh.
same thing, Derby Run.
Okay.
Like when you're too busy partying to show up for your events.
Did I add that?
Huh?
Did I add that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's somebody else.
Yeah, there's a few things out there. So many I don't remember.
Stuff.
Yeah. So the cobweb gives us more information. We're talking about spam blocking software, attorneys, different kinds of handles that you can use to get a hold of the subject, give you different clues of places to look. Another alias. Unfortunately, the profile is private. You can't get in from there. However, if you can get around that, you can use it to your advantage. But all sorts of fun stuff. And there's another association down at the bottom, somebody called BrainDocR. Looks like Brian, it's not. It's BrainDocR. This is a completely different dude, but he's another handle and access into the world of ICBKR that you may be able to exploit. You notice that they're both associated with Concord Law. So now you've got a school association that you can go back to and mine. You can maybe call them up and request academic records. They might be dumb enough to give them to you. Schools are fairly low security bars to cross. But they don't get you Facebook. And more importantly, even if you get Facebook, if you don't have access or if it's not a public profile, it's not going to get you anywhere because Facebook does take their security seriously. Does anybody know why Facebook takes their security seriously? Wrong. That's not why they take their security seriously. It's not because they care about you. It's not because they care about the law or your privacy or anything like that. It's because you are the product and you are their source of income. And if that data gets compromised, they can't make money anymore. Just like hospitals and HIPAA. They don't want to comply with HIPAA. Not because it's the right thing to do, but if they don't, they can't do business. So that's why they're worried about security. So if you have access into a profile, and this is one of the things that if you do this professionally or as a habit for a lot of things, who's got more than one Facebook profile? Yeah?
It'd be a violation of terms of service.
Is it? Is it a legal contract if both parties don't agree? Because I didn't agree to what they're doing with my data, so why should I honor a contract that they claim is in force? Screw that. Anyways, I have like 27 different Facebook profiles, and they all have different characteristics and associations. Chances are, one of those profiles, I can get access to your information. Unless you are extremely guarded on Facebook with what you do and who you associate with. And remember, in Facebook, it's not just what you do, it's what your friends do. So unless your friends are just as paranoid as you, and it's good enough OPSEC to keep people out who know what they're doing, your stuff's accessible. But Facebook, even better, I can just give them money and get whatever I want. So I could send them money and say, show me everything that's got ICBKR in it, and they'll just give it to me, because that's how they work. No subpoenas, just money. Subpoenas take time to execute. They're boring. My job is very boring. I copy hard drives for a living. That's essentially what I do. DCF, LDD, in-file, out-file, copy hard drives. But it pays the bills. And then I get to do fun stuff like this once in a while. But it gets boring fast too, because it comes back to looking for information and hunting down lawyers to do things for you. You've got to have subpoenas, I know. You've got to have subpoenas for this stuff. It's the only way to make it work. And it may alert a canary. Some of us have legal canaries out there that go off when we are given subpoenas. I have them on my website. And if I am subpoenaed for any reason about client information, then those canaries go off. There's nothing that they can do about it, thankfully. There's legal costs that go along with it, so it's business. There's a good article on EFF.org. The URL's at the bottom, which you probably can't read, but it will be in the presentation slides online, or you can just Google Secret Files Anatomy Bogus Subpoena. And it tells you about bogus subpoenas and how they can be used to pry information out of people. And of course, there's humanitarian concerns to all of this. Don't be bad. You can not only use this stuff for direct harm, finding individuals, tracking them down, and exposing them, doxing people. You can also make their lives a living hell, and that's where it gets horribly wrong. Say Adrian is looking for a job. I can make his life much more difficult by purchasing Google AdWords and putting a horrible article about him right at the top of the Google search. So
independently wealthy.
Really? Can I borrow some money?
Not really, because I'm not that independently wealthy. I'm enough to get to my diet at about 70.
Yeah, so say he's trying to get a job in academia. I can write a blog article about him or claiming to be him to make it even worse, that is directly confrontational with academia. And they will be very reluctant to hire him. Yeah, we don't have to do that though, because so you can use these abilities in both directions for good or bad. Questions. Before we get to questions, thank you for sitting through the entire presentation. I appreciate that. I hope it was useful. And here is your bonus slide. One of you, at least one of you, should go take this material and run with it. It's a way of thinking about how to do exploits that I have not seen previously. I just thought of it yesterday. If you want to find bugs to exploit and ways to exploit systems, this has nothing to do with OSINT or social engineering. This is red team hacker stuff. So here's OC. If you want to find the buffalo, go to where they roam. Everybody's sanitizing input these days. Well, they should be. But there's still a bunch of low-hanging fruit out there that I have not seen given the attention it deserves. So if somebody here with a technical bent that's bored would like to go and look at places where there are no sanitized input possible, that seems to me to be a very productive line of inquiry. And if you give it some thought, you'll be able to figure out where in the world of technology we have lots of data input with no sanitization of input. Because there's a ton of it, and it's just not being looked at very hard. So, gold mine for 0 days. Okay, that was fun. Back to the talk. Questions? Comments? criticism. I have prizes. No? Okay, well, we'll just get them out then because I don't want to carry them home. Who wants a t-shirt? It's a cool t-shirt. It's got a hacker on it. Yeah, it's just XL. Oh, didn't quite make it. Anybody want jerky? You guys got to share. They've already had it, so they know it's good. Your hands should have shot up. You should have taken that jerky. And then I have a golf shirt, extra large. All right. Yeah. No balls. Yeah, the t-shirt, yeah, by all means. Liticoat, I heard of those guys. They're dangerous.